My name is Ashtar, Athena, SherAn.
Now say your original name.
Saivani Sharma Singh, or Saivani Eversole.
And you were married to?
John Eversole.
Okay, now look, now you're...
It was 1952 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was 12 years old, and I didn't want to be on the planet anymore because there wasn't enough love. And so I was crying, I was looking up at the sky, and I asked that whoever brought me here, would you please come and take me home, because I can't be here. And a young blonde man came to me in a dream that night. And 20 years later, in 1972, I recognized that young blonde man as John Roger. I walked into my first seminar, 1972, in Chatsworth, and I went up to him, and I said, "Are you the young blonde man that's been coming to me in my dreams all these years?" And he said, "Yes, love. I've been working with you in this lifetime since around junior high." And he nailed it. He completely recognized me. I completely recognized him. In 1972, when I went to my first seminar, it was in Chatsworth, California, at the home of David and Heather Giorgio. And in those days, seminars consisted of JR sitting on an armchair out in the backyard, because by this time we had outgrown living rooms. And he was sitting in an armchair on the lawn, and we were all gathered, I would guess maybe 100, 150 of it at this point. And they would pass the mic around, and we would say our names and put things in the light. And that was my very first seminar experience with JR. And as I have shared with you, I recognized him the moment I saw him, and he me. And that became for me my whole life, because my whole life ever since has been involved with JR, the movement, and doing what we came to do, which was to open hearts and share love. It must have been about 1974 when we finally had gotten prana that JR came with a van and loaded my husband and I up from our two-story beautiful home in Santa Barbara, and carried us off and installed us in prana. Shortly after he installed us at prana, he bought a beautiful building from my husband John and started Eversole Dome Factory. He became the chairperson in charge of that whole operation. He staffed it with people from prana. He, I believe, fulfilled the desire of John's heart by giving him this opportunity to bring his dream into fruition, which was to build geodesic domes that would sustain themselves during what he foresaw would be severe weather, like we're having at this time on the planet. And these domes, you see, would withstand 200-mile velocity winds, and that was his vision, was to create this kind of housing. John Roger, he was there from the very, very get-go. And at one time, John was very discouraged because he couldn't quite get it perfect. And he said, "JR, I've got 33 failures." And John Roger said, "Fine, put the 33 failures together. I don't care how you do it, just put them together." And he did. And that was the first dome. And then John Roger had that dome installed up at the Arrowhead property, which at one point he had asked us actually to live on the property and manage it, which we ended up not doing. But we had a hand in getting the property at Arrowhead, Windermere property, prana. We got prana because of a dream that I had, a vision that I had, a week before JR invited us to come down and look at the property and tell him what we thought of it. And as soon as we drove onto the property with John Roger, and this again was, what, 1974, I recognized it from a dream I just had. And JR made me tell him the dream, and when I did, he said, "That's our sign from Spirit. We'll purchase this property." And that's our prana today.
Nice.
I have never ever doubted who JR is. I recognized him as a Christ-conscious master from the moment I laid eyes on him. I'd had 20 years of working with him on the inner planes, in the invisible, before I met him physically. Our first trip where I really got to know him was when we went to see Sai Baba in 1972. So there was never a question in my mind who JR is.
Okay.
In 1972, we decided we would go to India. We being John Roger, a group of us. And we had just gone out to have dinner after the first seminar that I had attended in Chatsworth. And so we laid up plans to go. This was August when I first met JR. So October 16th, we were in India to see Sai Baba for the first time. And the first thing that happened, which was very extraordinary, was that we got to meet the son of the great Russian artist, Nicholas Rorik's son, Svetoslav. And I was used as an instrument to bring that meeting between JR and Dr. Svetoslav Rorik. And afterwards, when JR and I were in a taxi together, he turned to me and he said, "You know he was one of the Ascended Masters, don't you?" I remember crying at the point. So we went to see Sai Baba, and this is the second Western group of Americans to ever go see Sai Baba. This is the early, early years before there was any Sai organization. And we were in this interview, 50 of us. JR was sitting at Sai Baba's feet. I was sitting next to Sai Baba on some sort of a couch. We were all clustered around the floor, all of us that had gone, many of whom are still in the movement, by the way. And Baba said to John Roger, "You are my gift of love to this world." And he had already told Muriel Engel, my dear friend, who got me into the movement originally, he is a great light, great soul. And then he told us that MSIA, which he called Saya. And JR said, "But Baba, it's pronounced differently." He said, I know, mere detail.
Hold on.
We were the largest American group, the second largest to ever go see Sai Baba. The year was 1972. And JR was sitting at Baba's feet. I'm sitting next to Sai Baba. And then the rest of the group was gathered, like so many flowers, at the feet of Sai Baba. Sai Baba immediately, which I thought was interesting, noticed that one of the people with JR, one of the staff, had his glasses hanging from his mouth. And that, I could tell, was bothering Sai Baba. So he turned to him and he said, "Have some respect for your teacher. Take those out of your mouth. Put them on your face properly." So he was very attentive that everyone should accord respect to JR, which I have to tell you is very unusual for Sai Baba. If you're a phony guru, he will not give you the time of day. Moreover, he will bust your number in a heartbeat. So for him to accord the respect that he did to JR was to me, very telling. Moreover, I have personally many, many photographs where JR and Sai Baba are standing together with their arms around each other. And they're glowing, their faces are glowing, like two divine beings, just in love with God and in love with love. And at one point, Sai Baba waved his hand, which is how he materializes things, and out of his palm came a pendant that said love on it, golden pendant. And he said to JR, "You are my gift of love to this world." And he gave him the pendant. I actually put it around his neck. And that shows up in the photographs. You can see Baba and JR standing with their arms around each other and that pendant around JR's neck. Then Sai Baba materialized John Roger a large, very, very large diamond, in which when you look into it, you can see Sai Baba moving about as if it was a television screen. He told us, oh, by the way, he also had a copy which he was reading, which was our original New Day Herald. It was called On the Light Side. And he was reading it. And he was reading, and he said, "Oh, good questions." And then he would read what JR had to say about the question. He said, "And good answers." And then he said MSIA would be around the world by the end of 1972. It would be known all over the world, that he was blessing it. And he also said, never worry about money. He said, "You see, it costs thousands of rupees to keep this ashram open for one day, but I never ask for money. I never take anything. I only give. And when you give forth love, love is always supported. So just give forth love, and everything you need will come." And so he was giving organizational directives of how we could start the movement, how it would be successful, and the keys that he had learned in starting it. Because as I said before, we were just out of the chute at this point. We hadn't started anything. We had no property. It was all just very much meeting in living rooms and sharing the spiritual teachings. And I'd like to share a little bit with you how that movement actually got started, because I was in on that ground floor. Muriel Engel was a member of the Sai Baba Center when I first became a devotee of Sai Baba, and this was in 1969, 3 years before I met JR physically, and she glowed. And I thought, whatever that woman has, I would like to know what it is, because anything that makes a person radiate light and love like she does, and joy, it must be a good thing. Well, she had a good friend by the name of John Roger. And so that's the first time I started hearing actually the name John Roger. And she was a foreign student counselor out at UCSB in Santa Barbara. And she was counseling students about spiritual matters, and she'd come to a point that she just really couldn't serve them properly, and she said, I need a teacher. So on one of her trips to Sai Baba, she asked him, she said, I need a teacher for these young people. And Sai Baba said, your teacher is at hand. You know, you've been given a sign. And she was disappointed, because she thought Sai Baba meant, you know, the inner master. But Sai Baba was referring to John Roger, because I believe it was Neva Dell Hunter that had told Muriel Engel that she was going to meet a young man that would be the most important person in her life and would indicate for her destiny, and that he would be wearing praying hands and a medallion around his neck. So Muriel Engel came back from her trip to Sai Baba. I think it was her second one. And she was giving a talk at which John Roger and certain of people that were of his early staff were with him, although they weren't really staff at that point. They were more like friends. And she stood up and she said, I have just met the Christ of these times, speaking about Sai Baba. And everybody closed down. Nobody wanted to hear another word she had to say. So she kind of beat a, rapid denouement to her talk and sat down. She had just sat down when a young man leaned over and praying hands fell out of his shirt, and it was John Roger. And he said, love, I'd like to hear more about that holy man that you met in India. And she said, well, come on home. I have some leftover spaghetti. We'll have some spaghetti, and I can share with you the story. So when Muriel's adopted son opened the door, his name was Marshall. And John Roger said, oh, you're the Marshall. I thought it was going to be like a Marshall. I was told that I was going to meet a Marshall who would be very instrumental in my starting my work. So that's how the movement got birthed that night over leftover spaghetti in Muriel Engel's home. And
Jack Reed was there, right?
Yeah, and she invited John Roger to sit in the living room on the armchair, which is how the movement started, in the living room in an armchair. And the young students that she was counseling came, and that's how the movement started. Okay, flash forward. Then we go to see Sai Baba in India in 1972. Muriel was there in that group. In fact, she was sitting right next to me. And that's how Baba started to really extend blessings to MSIA, because it was exactly what we had been told to do on this planet, which was to open hearts.
Stop there.